Hey everybody, it's Susan with Pumpkin Hill Stampers. I have a Stampin' Chat for you today. We're going to make a card using the Count My Blessings stamp set, which is a stamp set I actually won with my demo group. We're doing a bunch of challenges each week, which was kind of fun. This was going to be a challenge number 5, but I missed the deadline. But I'm still going to share it with you. And the gals in the group have been working really hard on their challenges, so I'm really proud of them. So this stamp set, I was really excited to pick it out last month as a winning set, and then today Stampin' Up! Retired it. So we have 1 month to play with it before it will be gone, but you may fall in love with it as much as I have as you look at the imagery, and so if you do, make sure you order it before the calendar ends, okay? So it's called Count My Blessings. So we're going to do this card. Now, my challenge was kind of twofold. The challenge for my demo group was to use the newest set in my collection. So having just won that and it came in the mail, that was my newest set. Okay, no decisions there, use that set. But then I had a second challenge. I'm in a demo swap with another group of gals, and the swap was to use our new blends, new blend alcohol markers, and to use vellum in the card design. So I wanted to take the 2 challenges and make 1 design and, get it done, be efficient. You all know how efficient I like to be. But then, since I designed the card for the challenge and then thought, oh, I'll just make it for the swap as well, then they retired the set. So now, since my swaps really are supposed to be a set that will be current, since the idea is that we'll have samples to share going forward, I'm going to have to use this design but with a different set. So we'll probably be seeing that on another video in another week or so. But for the meantime, I'm going to show you this one because I'm really excited about what I did, and I think you're going to find it pretty cool. So I'm going to set that one there. Hopefully you can see it as I'm working. And it's going to take me a little time because I have to do all the coloring as I'm going. So if you're watching my video and if your feed will allow you to fast forward, you might want to fast forward a little bit as I'm doing the coloring part. But I'm going to do my best to keep chatting with you about what I'm doing as I go. Okay, so I used Early Espresso as my card base. I've got a mount of Old Olive, and I picked those 2 colors because I was doing acorns and I'm using the browns and the greens in my blender pen, so I wanted to coordinate colors there. Then I've got 2 layers. I've got 1 layer of Whisper White and 1 layer of vellum. Okay, because remember one of my challenges was to use vellum. So let's go ahead and do some stamping. Let me move the rest of this all the way for now. So we can do the Whisper White first. Now since I'm going to be coloring with the blender pens, you have to stamp with the Memento ink. Okay, so I'm actually going to re-ink this for a second. I want to make sure it's nice and dark so you guys can see what I'm doing. Alright, so on the Whisper White piece with Memento Black, because I'm going to color with the blends, I'm stamping the image of this like swaying leaf. Okay? So I'm just going to ink that up, make sure it's not too dark. No, it'll be fine. Okay, so I'm going to stamp this kind of willy-nilly. I don't really want it to overlap so much. I want it to be spread out. I'm not looking for a dense population of images, but I do want it to be full. Okay, so I'm just kind of going in and out. Alright, so we're going to let that dry for a second. Then on the vellum, now vellum's a little bit tricky. On the vellum, I'm going to stamp with the Memento again, and I'm going to stamp the acorn image. Again, I'm not really worried about where it goes, I just want a nice full image. So I'm just going to come around the cardstock and place those in there. Now something I found on my sample when I inked it in Memento, and then when I went, even after it was what I thought was dry, I went back with my blenders it seemed to pull the Memento ink off the vellum. And vellum's a little tricky, like I said. It takes a while to dry. You can heat set it. Sometimes I emboss on it so that I know it's really set. But what I like to do on vellum is first I'm going to flip it over on my mat and just press it into my scrap mat and kind of blot off the extra ink. Okay, so that just, you can see a little bit. I just blotted the ink a little bit. Now the second thing you can do with vellum, and I've done this on a couple of cards lately, is color on the back side. So I'm going to move this black in. I think maybe you'll see it better. So I'm going to color on the vellum on the back side. And so what that does is your marker or your blenders aren't going to actually even come in contact with your black ink. And then it even gives you kind of a glowing color that comes through the vellum, especially when we're going to mount it on the white behind it. So this is where the coloring comes in. So again, if you want to fast forward, you go ahead. Now the fun thing about blenders is I'm not worried about going over my marker, and even though I'm taking my time on the edges, the center part, I really can just swirl that color in there. So I'm just going to go around kind of the tips of my leaf images, and then I'm going to come back and just shade with my blender in the middle. Now if you did lots of layers of it as it dries and then you apply more, you will get darker shadows of the color. That's one of the perks of the blender pens. But I'm also going to come back in, maybe you can see it on the sample as I'm working. When I come back in with the darker blender of this color, which currently is Old Olive, so this is the lighter Old Olive pen. When I come back in with the dark Old Olive pen, I'm going to trace over some of the lines that were provided by the stamp. The veins of the leaf, the stem of the leaf, possibly even there's some shadowing on the leaf. So you can kind of pick what you want to pick up as the darker part of the image. You could also just leave it as one color. That's perfectly fine as well. Remember, it's your card. You can make it your way. But let the image help you decide where those darker lines or shadow lines should be applied, and you might find better success. It took me a long time, we're talking years, to really understand that the stamp is designed to help us really decide how to shade it. You know, we might pick different colors or have different techniques that we like to use, whether it's watercoloring, blenders, markers, pencils, you name it, we've got it or have had it. But the imagery has stayed the same through the years. So, you know, 30 years going into this with Stampin' Up, they've really gotten very smart about their artwork, their consistency, and really trying to aid us in creating beautiful cards or scrapbook pages or gifts, which many of us do, by not making us have to work too hard about making the images look lifelike, fun. So trust your images to do what they need to do. Okay, and remember with the blender pens you want to make sure it clicks shut because you don't want that to dry out. So now I'm going to come back in, so this is the darker green. You see the two tips, they're just slightly different shades. So I'm coming in with a darker green, and I'm just going to trace along some of these vine lines. Vine, not fine, but they are fine lines. The vine lines, just so there's some multiple colors going on. There's two tips to these pens. I'm using the paintbrush tip because I'm not worried about the lines smudging it all, because it's, you know, one great big green leaf. If you really wanted to color inside a particular image, you might want to use the fine tip end of the pen, in which case you have a little more control, you're applying it to a smaller space at one time, and some people just have better luck with the finer tip pen, not just on the blenders but also with our markers. So you do what works best for you, and don't worry about doing it exactly the way I do it, because we all have our own ways of applying color and ink and seeing the imagery. So, alright, there's the last one for that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is color in the acorns. So for the acorns, I'm using what we refer to as dark crumb cake, and then I'm going to pair it with a bronze marker. So the blenders come generally a light and a dark for the colors, and then we have three. We have a blush, we have a bronze, and then we have a color lifter pen. So the color lifter pen actually helps you erase ink if you get it outside of the imagery line and you want it to be cleaned up. You can, it's not bleach, but basically it bleaches out the ink as it dries, and so you can clean up your imagery. The blush and the bronze pen are for if you want to color in skin tones on stamps or on images. They allow you to have colors that are closer to skin tones. And so I found that I wanted to use the darker crumb cake for the acorns, but then I wanted a darker yet brownish color for the acorn tops. And so since I had gone with the darker crumb cake for the acorn, I had to step up and use the bronze marker for a slightly darker brown on the acorn tops. So just going to come in and swirl some color on there. So bear with me for a minute while I'm finishing this. Now again, with the vellum, the blender ink, the alcohol ink, is going to be drying quickly. But you still want to be careful that the vellum is dry before you put it down on the other sections of the card, because you don't want any of that ink to transfer. So you may want to let it set for a few minutes, or you may want to, like I did on the other side with the memento, flip it and let it blot onto your scrap mat a little. Just going to go back and give twigs a little bit of coloring as well. It really is fun to just color with these markers. So I know many of you had the blendabilities, and I hope they're still working for you. But if you didn't have the chance to get the blendabilities and you want a chance to play with these markers, let me know and I will bring them to you, or you can come to me and we will do some stamping together and you can play with them. That's what it's all about for me, is letting you play with product and see if you like it, and I really think you're going to like these. Alright, so there's my acorn one. So I'm going to set this one aside over here for a minute. Let me move this back out of the way. So now I've got this other one I did. Now this one I'm just going to add some green to it. This is going to become the secondary layer behind the vellum. So I do want to have a little bit of color on it. So again, if you don't want to watch me color every little leaf, you can fast forward the video. I won't know, and I won't take any offense to that. I'm sure you all know how to color, but for the sake of having a finished card when we're done, I'm going to keep working as I go. So I'm working on this card in December, and I know I'm not live, so not going to actually see your comments, but you know, if you watch this video, you could comment below or send me an email. How many of you are making your holiday cards this year? Because obviously I'm not making holiday cards at the moment, but I do intend to make my holiday cards, as I often do for the last 18 years or so. And I recently did an interview, and as I was kind of preparing my facts and figures for the interviewer, I realized I send out about 150 handmade greeting cards each year, and that many of them are greatly appreciated by the receiver, which always makes me feel good and cherished, and like the things I'm doing make people happy. So hopefully you are on my greeting card list as well, or if you probably know you're not on my greeting card list because you haven't had a card from me, drop me a message and I will happily add you to my greeting card list. So don't be shy, no pressure, just a fun card in the mail. I had a friend who actually did scrapbooking in Oregon just have a post on Facebook about sending a card to a recovering soldier. I posted that post on my Facebook page, both personally and my Pumpkin Hill Stampers page. So those of you who stamp with me, if you have an extra greeting card, or if you just want to partake in doing some holiday cheer, the address is there to send a greeting card, and if you post a photo or a comment that you've done it, I would be thrilled to know that our group is doing a service for our servicemen who've done so much for us. A little time on our part will never match the time they've given us on theirs. Okay, coloring is done. So we've got our layers. Okay, I am gonna make sure that looks pretty dry. So watch what happens when so this is my lower layer and here's my vellum layer. When I put them over, the vellum lets that lower layer peek through. Isn't that neat? Kind of cool, huh? I think that's fantastic. Alright, so here's this. Now, as you can see, I've got this tag on here. And so what I have is I have a square from our Stitch Shape Framelits. This one's square on Whisper White. And it's going to get placed on our card, roughly over here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm getting out my espresso ink, and I'm going to stamp the Thinking of You on the square, kind of crossed corner to corner. Then I'm going to come back in with my memento, and I'm going to add a couple more acorn images on here. They're just going to peek up and down from the top. Okay, because that's kind of super fine art, so it's not heavy, so the Thinking of You does not get lost. Then, of course, we need to color this in. I'm going to let that dry for a second. While that's drying, let's go ahead and mount our front here. So my vellum is going to go on my white, and the way I'm going to attach it is I know that this is going to go over the top, so I'm going to put snail on the vellum behind where I expect that to go. Usually you can see snail through vellum, but since we're going to have this tag on the front, I know it's going to be hidden, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it freely on that piece of vellum, and then just add that right over the top of the Whisper White. Okay, and then that's just going to get mounted onto our old olive. Now look, this is the back of that Whisper White. Thick Whisper White is a little bit better. This is the thin Whisper White. It will bleed through. So if you're coloring an image and then putting it on a card, you want to make sure you back it on something dark, so that when you look at the inside of the card, you don't have all these blotches of ink. So that's kind of something different with our with our product for this one. Okay, now this whole thing is going to get mounted onto, you guessed it, the Early Espresso card. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in. I've got this tag. I'm going to do a quick blending on here. Now it might be neat if you left it black and white, but I really like it colored in, and why not have an excuse to use your blender pens yet again. So how much of this shows is really up to how you stamp it on there. You'll notice I did flip it upside down so that the acorns were all headed towards the greeting. But if you like the leaf image more, you could certainly turn it so that you had more leaf showing than acorn. And like I said, sometimes I feel like I'm just scribbling the color in there because it's so freeform and there's such control on the tip of these markers that I'm not really worried about going outside of the lines. And I know that if I do go outside the lines, I can use my color lifter to correct it if I need to. Sometimes I leave it because remember, it is a handmade card, right? We're not perfect, and we're making it because we care about the person we're sending it to. If it was going to be perfect, we would just print them on the big printers and make lots and lots of the same card. And really, every time we make a card, the next one's a little bit different, even if we copy the design. So don't be afraid to have a little blemish or extra spot of color outside the lines. It just shows that you were working on it and enjoying your time as you were creating it. So don't stress over those small blemishes. I know some of you would have to restamp the whole thing. I get it. You go right ahead. It's your card. But don't worry about it all the time. Okay, so now as you can notice, I've got a square, but I've gotten this edge that's gone. So look what I did. This was kind of a new idea for me. So I placed this where I want it. Okay, and now I'm going to take my bone folder, and you know how I've got this edge here underneath? I'm just going to use it to kind of trace my bone folder down and put a crease in right along that edge. Now, you might think, okay, now she's going to snip that off. No, I'm not. I'm just going to fold it under. Okay, and what I'm going to do is put dimensionals on the back of this. Now watch where I put the first one. I tack that right down. See? Then I put those dimensionals on there. So it's going to help it stay folded. And now I can just come back, line that up along with the edge, and voila. I got the front of my card. Right? Alright, now the inside. We do have a dark Early Espresso base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the greeting, and this one says, "When I count my blessings, you are on the top of my list." So I'm putting that right in the center. And then I'm coming back in with the memento one more time because I'm going to use the acorns again. Might as well keep it consistent. I'm putting one on the bottom. I'm going to flip it over, put one on the top. Okay, now on this card I left it, well, I left this one black. I started coloring up there. I didn't finish. So if you want to leave it all kind of black and white on the inside, that might be a little bit different. But if you want to color it, you can go ahead and do coloring on there as well. So I will spare you that in the video since you've watched me color an immense amount so far. So that's just going to go in to your card. Now who wouldn't like getting a card that says that when you count your blessings, you're on the top of my list? And then for the envelope I used the secondary image, the leafy vine, and I just did it on the envelope. I would not recommend coloring with the blender pens on your envelopes because they're very thin and that color's going to bleed. It will dry, but it will bleed through, so it might not look fantastic. But, you know, it's yours, so you can do it the way you want to. Alright ladies, so that's our little Stampin' Chat. I know it was probably a little bit long, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked my little story about my challenge and my swap. And now I'm going to try to duplicate this design with the vellum with the second layer imaging underneath with a different stamp set that hopefully will still be current next year. And we'll have some more fun. So for now, enjoy your day, do some stamping, and I will see you all very soon. Thanks everybody. Happy stamping!